Welcome, Sovryns, to our first, but not our last, adoption-focused town hall. Today we will be talking about championing and growing the Sovryn community, taking the Sovryn message further and introducing it to more people. I'm going to be sharing and presenting a presentation. So a few things about this presentation. The presentation today will be on a high level, which is to say it is designed to focus on the strategy and the execution plan, but we will have additional town halls around the different sections. The other thing that I want to point out is that I myself am not a marketing professional. However, I have spoken to a large number of marketing professionals in the crypto space and outside of it. I've interviewed people who this is their job. And so we've managed to gather what we understand to be the current cutting edge of marketing in the crypto space. I think that it leaves a lot to be desired. And so I think we can go significantly beyond what sort of at least the agencies that are out there are offering. And then finally, the goal here is to give us all a background and a solid understanding of how we're thinking about Sovryn adoption, Sovryn communication, Sovryn marketing, and then continue to have the conversation both in these town halls and on the forums. We'll start with the 7 fundamentals of marketing just generally, and specifically the 7 fundamentals we'll be focusing on for Sovryn's adoption strategy. Obviously, the first part of that is going to be strategy, so that's the first thing we'll talk about. Then we'll talk about brand positioning. We'll talk about target audience. We'll talk about UX, user experience, because the user experience is part of how the product markets itself, and so is not separate. Then we'll talk about distribution, in other words, how we will distribute the message, data, and finally, execution. So moving to strategy. Strategy is all about trade-offs. It's about asking yourself, what would we like to do? And then recognizing that you can't do everything, and so you have to make hard choices. So let's talk about the 5 hard choices that we believe we should be making. First hard choice. Do we want to go with organic or paid as the primary mechanism which we reach and acquire new leads and new users? Organic is slower, is more difficult. Paid is obviously more expensive and also more mercenary. So at this point, we believe that what we should be focusing on as Sovryn is organic. We are a community-driven ecosystem. We need to have an authentic voice, and we need to reach new users through organic channels. And so one part of our strategy will be a focus primarily on organic versus paid. The other is steak versus sizzle. And what this means is, are we going to be providing just the straight facts around what we're doing, or are we going to be talking about the implications and the cool stuff? All right, so when you get a steak in a restaurant, there's the meat, and then there's the sizzle. And the sizzle is what sells the steak. I think up until this point, most of our communications has focused around steak. And I'm going to suggest that from this point on, we should be focusing on sizzle, on how the steak changes things for people. We need to explain to people more about the implications rather than more about the technology. Third, are we going to focus on individuals or institutions? For the same reason, and with the same reasoning as why we would prefer at this point in time to be focusing on organic versus paid, I think at this point we should be focusing on individuals versus institutions. That doesn't mean that institutions aren't potentially going to be interested in Sovryn. It doesn't mean that institutions aren't already talking to us. But most of our communications focus should be focused on individuals and building out our community. Fourth, long-term versus short-term. This is a big one, and I think it's one of the biggest places we need to shift our strategy. Much of our communication has been quite short-term focused. up until now? What are we going to do in the next quarter? What are we going to do in the next month? What have we already done? A big reason that we've done this is because we didn't want to enter into the trap of selling vaporware. We didn't want to enter into the trap of just hyping stuff up or talking about partnerships that haven't happened, something that we see very frequently in the rest of the crypto space. However, upon reflection, I think this was a mistake because we have a long-term vision and we need to calculate that in everything that we do in terms of educating our community and ourselves around how we think about the project, and in terms of providing a longer-term inspiring vision for people to understand where Sovryn is going. So I think our communication needs to start focusing more on long-term versus short-term. Finally, there's the question of champions versus employees. And what I mean by that is there's basically two ways we could manage this effort, right? One is to have a small group of professionals, potentially agencies, potentially an internal team, managing our communication strategy. And that is easier to manage versus spending more time and more resources, right? Because you have limited time and resources. So where are you going to focus it? So another option is to focus more of that on building out tools, methodologies, and procedures for our community to become more engaged and active and to take more initiative. Here, I think we need to go through a transitionary phase. First of all, we need to stop working with external agencies. That has already been done. Second, we need to professionalize our core team of adoption sort of core members. And that is something we're going to be doing over the coming quarter. But ultimately, and I think for the second half of this year, a lot of our efforts are going to be around providing and facilitating our community with better tools. And this town hall is part of that. Operation Champion is part of that. And some other things that I'll be talking about today are part of that. So actually putting the effort into giving more tools to the wider community. And finally, there's the question of hype spikes, right? So beyond all of these sort of trade-offs, there's also a question of how we're going to drive sort of those sugary rushes of hype and excitement around what we're doing. And I think that is primarily going to be driven by product, partnership, and other types of announcements. And to make those effective, there's some things that we can do. We can space them out a little bit more, have the adoption team actually drive the roadmap a little bit more, and drive our focus that way. And I think this can prove to be very effective for us and was very effective for us in the first half of last year. So those are the big beats from a strategic perspective. Now moving on to the next section, which is brand. So first I'd like to talk a little bit about what brand is as we view it. So our view around brand is that what it is effectively how we position ourselves in terms of the category that people use when they're thinking about Sovryn. And what I mean by that is we have a different category in our brain for different things, right? So for example, even Bitcoin can fill different categories for people. Some people, the category that Bitcoin fits into is investment. Some people, the category that Bitcoin fits into is money. Some people, the category that Bitcoin fits into is speculation. It's very important, if we're going to have a strong brand, is that we can position ourselves so that we have a consistent category that we can own. So moving to the next slide, what that means is that for us, brand and positioning is about category ownership. We want to create and own a category. That is the best way that you own a category, especially if you're a relatively young and small and innovative project, is that you create a new category. And that means not necessarily presenting yourself as better, but presenting yourself as different. It means providing a highly consistent message, and it means that that message needs to be inspiring. So that means providing aspirational goals, clear principles, and a consistent voice. And this ties back into what we were talking about a moment ago about having the focus on the long term, where the way we create that category is talk about the category that we are creating, not so much the category that we have created already. And in so doing, providing a vision for the future instead of talking about what we've already accomplished in the past, although that can be supportive evidence for why we will continue to accomplish things in the future. In order to help us accomplish this, we have turned to a group of professionals who are not from the crypto space but are Bitcoiners. This is a Los Angeles-based branding firm called Pattern, who have worked with the likes of Netflix, Metallica, PAX, and multiple others. And now they're working with us. We've been working with them for a few weeks now, and we expect to be able to complete our work with them for the purpose of recategorizing, rebranding Sovryn so that it can have that kind of category ownership by the beginning of June. So what do we mean when we're talking about a category? And specifically, this is the next slide, I think where we are now is that Sovryn is viewed as Bitcoin for DeFi dApp, a very extensive dApp with a whole suite of products, but we're still in the dApp phase in terms of the category that we hold in most people's minds. And that's because that's where we are, but it's not where we're going. The other thing that we've been doing and we've been talking about is how we're building out our own rollup, how we're going to eventually be able to provide a direct integration with Bitcoin main chain for our security. And that conversation is kind of being like a layer 1 or layer 1.5 or a layer 2 for Bitcoin platform. And if you guys look at the way the market is treating different projects in terms of valuation, in terms of excitement, and in terms of how much attention they get, today the big winners are like these various smart contract layer 1 platforms, right? The Polygons, BSCs, Terras of the world. However, the biggest winner always is the project that instead of being a Me Too project gets to be a project that defines a category, becomes the first project in a category that becomes important. I believe that the next big category is DAOs, or really it's going to be sort of the future of nations, right? Cloud nations, I believe, is going to be the next big category. And partially I say this because the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I think we should leapfrog the conversation going from being a dApp to a layer 1 platform to branding ourselves as the owners of the category, of being the sovereign nation, the first proper Bitcoin nation, the first proper cloud nation. Now, this is an intuition that I have and is probably the biggest and riskiest bet that we could take in terms of where we want the project to go and also how we will be communicating the project. And so I think this is something that we should be discussing. And it's not, something I'm dictating now. But certainly in terms of what inspires me about the project, in terms of what I think is the real potential of the project and what I think is the most compelling story and the way that we create group category ownership in terms of our positioning, this would be my bet. Moving on, what we expect to deliver in terms of the brand over the course of the next few weeks, delivering by early June, are the following deliverables. A brand Bible, which will include a refreshed visual language, a tone of voice, which also will be reflected in all of our communications, everything from blog posts to Twitter to Reddit to the way CMs talk with each other, and principles and a constitution, which will not be formed top-down, but will be formed as part of a community effort. And then in addition to that, and informed by that, will be website and design. So we'll have an entirely new, refreshed website, which will be easier to navigate, provide vastly more information, and tell our story significantly better, and I think will be the kickoff for the next stage of Sovryn. Which brings me to the next of our seven fundamentals, which is target audience. We absolutely have to know who it is that we're talking to, and this is not it's actually much more complicated than it might appear, because we need to think carefully not just how we differentiate ourselves, but also how we differentiate type of audience we're talking to. So where we are now in terms of target audience is we believe our target audience is a cloud of people who are at the conjunction of interests, where they're interested in and supportive and holders of Bitcoin. At the same time, they're interested not just in Bitcoin as a monetary speculation, but because they're interested in their self-sovereignty and privacy and freedom. Our natural audience has a long-term vision for what they want for themselves and what they want for the world. And they also are practical people who want to be able to generate yield on their assets. Now, not everyone who's interested in Sovryn is going to be equally interested in all of these things or necessarily interested in all four. However, it is the conjunction of these which is sort of going to be our lowest hanging fruit, and it is the cloud of interests around us that we need to be targeting. And so how do we figure out how to target that? This type of user, this type of person? It's through data and research, which we're investing significantly in. We've already invested in, but we will now be investigating with increased vigor. And then it's prioritizing amongst the various audiences that we discover, right? Against the different types of personas that we have created, and we'll talk about this when we have the target audience town hall, how we communicate with this audience. So that brings me to user experience. In terms of user experience, we can break the user experience up into three types of user experience. The first is the virgin experience. This is the first time a user encounters Sovryn. So from a brand perspective, that's basically the first impression is what brand is all about. Although brand continues to play a role in ongoing and Sovryn experience. It is also the tutorials and wiki and educational material that we provide. And of course, it is the onboarding, the first-time flow that users have when utilizing the system. So all of these things are going to be under significant improvement. And this is going to be the area that, from a UX perspective, the front-end team, the design team, and the product team will be focusing themselves in coordination with the adoption team over the coming quarter. So this is going to be our big priority for the next few months. After that, we have the ongoing experience. What is the ongoing experience? The ongoing experience is the experience that a user who have already sort of become a Sovryn user are using. So this includes things like functionality. So we need to have easy controls and more controls, allow users to have better control and more sovereignty over their experience. Also means increased simplicity. It means better explanations like tooltips within the system. It means better notifications, which are privacy preserving, direct communication to users, and can provide them information that they need, like, for example, if they need to top up a position in order to avoid liquidation. And it means improved support, like intercom and metrics that allow us to understand how our users are using the system and where they may be encountering problems and discover bugs, even if they are not reported. And then finally, there's the Sovryn experience, which is going beyond just the product experience, but also understanding the principles, the mission of Sovryn, and becoming an active user of Sovryn. This includes plutocracy, engagement, and the rabbit hole of deeper understanding of what it is that Sovryn is looking to improve. And here too, the adoption team are going to be taking the lead. And so actually we're doing a barbell thing here, where we're going to be focusing on 1 and 3 in the near term. And slightly as a result, obviously, if we're going to be neglecting anything, it's going to be this, but we will be coming back to this. And in terms of doing this, we've already gotten to the point that we're about to introduce intercom, which will provide a much streamlined way of communicating with our users. We are improving the Gitbook, in other words, the wiki. We're improving answers, and there's a large number of other pieces that are going to be going into this. And this brings me to distribution. Distribution is, let's say we've created a bunch of great content. How are we going to get this content out? So there's basically two primary categories of distribution. The first is earned, and that includes things. What earned means is basically other people or we put the effort to create the content, and we're not paying, or usually not paying, to get it out there, right? So that includes public relations or PR, social media activity, content production, events that we create, channel partners, which is very important, which is wallets, exchanges, and other partners who are integrating with us, also hosting events and educating their users. And so you guys have probably seen what we recently did with Gate.io. You probably saw some tweets that are from potential partners that tweeted about us. That is the kind of activity. And also it's them integrating our systems directly, bringing us users through effectively their front ends. And then finally, SEO. We will be focusing on this side as part of our strategy, because this brings us back to the organic versus paid. And then on the paid side, there's ads. And to the extent that we use that, we'd probably focus primarily on retargeting. In other words, users who have already shown an interest in Sovryn, getting them to re-engage if they're not engaged. It will also include things like discovery channels, so getting onto more of these DeFi tracking websites, getting, CoinMarketCap, Learn to Earn, creating our own things like that. We've been identifying a large number of discovery channels of that kind. And so to the extent that we are using paid, that would be the kind of thing that we would be doing. And then finally, KOLs, also known as influencers or thought leaders. And here, to the extent that it's pay to play, we might choose to take advantage of this, but we will continue to be very cautious about this. So how do we choose where to focus our efforts with regards to this? So there's what's known as the bullseye framework. Basically, you try to choose what your main focus is, what you think could potentially be promising but isn't low-hanging fruit, and then there's long-shot opportunities. And then, even within your main focus, you put a lot of effort into only a subset of these. Saturate them, get them right before moving on to the next ones. We are still in the process of deciding exactly where we believe we should, over the next quarter, focus the majority of our efforts, but we definitely know that brand and website are going to be part of that. And we know that content and marketing is going to be part of that. With regards to the others, we are doing them, but we'll have to choose to what degree we prioritize our resources around them. As I mentioned, content marketing is going to be key to this. And what does content marketing mean? We're going to have a town hall around distribution and content, but to give you guys some sense, sorry, this is the wrong slide, putting together in-depth guides, working with other people in the space to help get their message out, people who are expert in privacy, people who are experts in earning yield with your Bitcoin. We'll be partnering with them to create the type of content which can educate not just our existing community, but also the type of people who would potentially be interested in what we're doing. We're also making sure that we're creating much clearer procedures around everything that we do. So for example, with social media, introducing a calendar and standardized cadence in addition to the announcements and sort of special things that we put out. Which brings me to the next to last or sixth fundamental pillar. And this is key, crucial, data and analytics. All right, So we could break analytics up into two pieces. The first is strategy. And what are the key things that we think that we need from a data analytics perspective and that we're currently engaged in or have already put together or are putting together and are engaged in refining. The first is user profiles. This comes back to our target audience, having an in-depth understanding of our target audience. What are their likes and dislikes? Where do they get their information from? What things which even aren't engaged in crypto, like what are the YouTube channels that they watch that have nothing to do with crypto? Are they really into history? Are they really into cars? Are they really into cooking shows? Right? Figuring out a really strong sense of the key personas that are attracted to Sovryn so that we can target what we're doing to basically someone that feels like they're a friend to us in terms of what we know. Beyond that, there's KPIs or key performance indicators. This is tied to OKRs. So the current measures that we're putting down for every single team, for Sovryn as a whole, and perhaps most importantly, for individual contributors. Accountability to providing and achieving certain targets within a quarter, within a month, and within the year, so that everyone knows exactly who is responsible for what, understand what it is that they need to achieve, and so that we can monitor whether or not we are hitting our targets. That type of KPI work, working around those metrics, is extremely important because it helps clarify the implications of our strategy, how we execute upon it, and helps coordination across the team. And then finally, it's the ability to provide for lifetime value assessment. In other words, so that we know a new user that comes from a specific channel, how much value they are going to be generating for SOV stakers, how much value in terms of revenue they are providing to the protocol, so that we can choose to invest in certain channels with a mathematical certainty of whether or not we are accomplishing cost-effective marketing. And that is basically ROI, our return on investment when it comes to marketing spend, be it paid, organic, people's time, and people's work. Now, to achieve all of this, we have an analytics hierarchy, and I want to tell you guys where we are in terms of this analytics hierarchy. So the first part that makes all of this possible is data collection. Data collection is very difficult for Sovryn because we have a fundamental interest in maintaining as much user control and user privacy as possible. However, to the extent that we can do data collection, it is by observing the activity of users to the depth and then the activity of wallets on-chain, right? Using publicly available information, and then being able to collect that information in a way which is accessible and usable for the next step, which is data analysis. Despite the fact that these have been a very, very big challenge for us, we now have in place a large set of tools that are becoming available to us, and we're starting to add to our team the kind of people who can do. So data collection is something that we have already begun. So for example, our integration with the graph has provided us with a huge amount of data. This will be reflected for users as well in terms of giving you guys better understanding through the UI of where your positions are, etc. But for us, in addition to that, it's going to help understand our users and understand how people are using our system. And we also now have more people who are able to join and assist with data analysis. And if this is something that you guys are interested in doing and have mathematical analytical skills, this is something where there's a lot of really interesting insights that we can be achieving. And so over time, we'd like to offer you guys, to play a bigger role in that. Third, we have attribution and growth metrics. So what is attribution? Attribution means basically it's bringing things back to ROI, right? It's the ability to say, all right, we did this podcast. Cool. So like 30,000 people watched the podcast on YouTube. What does that mean, right? How many people came to the website from that? How many people became a user? how many of those users were still a user a month later? What number of trades did they on average make? How much revenue did that generate, right? Attributing the results and the growth metrics to the activity. This is, if you can do it well, a superpower. And while I don't have, much of a background in marketing per se, I do have a background in attribution and growth metrics, and we have other people on the team who have even stronger backgrounds. And I believe this is going to become one of the key things which is going to give us a key advantage going forward. And if we do our jobs properly, what that allows us to do is predictive modeling. And predictive modeling is the ability not to just look backwards and say, all right, we did certain things. What did it do for us? But also to use this information to predict what our future actions will bring to us. That means things like predicting which products or features are going to be most successful. It means being able to say if we advertise in a certain place or utilize a certain channel, how many new users that will bring to us. And what that allows us to do is have much more rational, much more informed understanding of what our KPIs should be, what we can achieve within a year, and will also be information that we'll be able to hopefully, and it won't ever be 100%, right? But it will be able to be something that over the course of community meetings and town halls, we'll be able to communicate to our community as a whole and say, listen, guys, we now believe that we have the ability to grow over the coming 6 months at a rate of, between 15 and 23% month over month, and these are the activities that we believe that will be able to drive that kind of growth. Predictive modeling is sort of like the final stage and holy grail, and if we do our job well with all of these other things, we'll be able to get to predictive modeling as well. It won't happen immediately. We'll need several months of data in order to build up both the skill set and the models, but that is where we're going. All right, and that brings me finally to execution. All right, the seventh fundamental. Right, all of this is cool, but it doesn't mean anything if we don't properly execute on it. So how are we going to execute on this? So there's a few elements here. One is we're putting together what we call a cadence and timing plan. Cadence is the rhythm in which we are able to put out the different aspects of what we're working on. So we have day-to-day cadence, right? So for example, today there needs to be this many posts to Twitter, this many posts to Reddit, this many posts to Instagram, right? That's the daily cadence. A weekly cadence. We need this many blog posts, we need this much new pages on the wiki, or whatever the activity happens to be that we are involved in. And then we have higher orders of cadence. So for example, what we will now allow the adoption team to start doing is having more of a say over when we release products rather than just releasing them when they're ready. And that means that the adoption team will be able to say, we need 3 weeks to organize a campaign around any given announcement. Or we can have big campaigns, which are 2 weeks, and small campaigns, which are 2 weeks, and big campaigns, which are 4 weeks, right? And then we start saying, all right, that is the rhythm at which we'll be releasing things. And then we can have even higher order, which is twice a year we have a big event, Sovryn, where we announce the big plans for the coming 6 months, where the community gets together and is able to meet, right? That is cadence and timing and provides a higher degree of predictability to the teams that are working on it, allows us to engage with people who aren't part of the core team so that they also know what the rhythm is, and allows us to constantly improve the efficiency with which we're doing those activities, because we become very, very practiced. Like with the ritual of, all right, we're doing over the next week, we have a campaign. So we know that we are, this is what a campaign feels like. These are the different pieces that we need to do. So we've put together playbooks around what a campaign needs to look like. We're putting together these campaign things, and we're training our team to work with these playbooks and the cadence, and to have ongoing meetings also every so often to talk about what's working and what's not working and constantly refine the efficiency and effectiveness with which we're able to do that. It also means talent. We're currently in the process of looking to bring in world-class talent to help us on the adoption and marketing side. We've been meeting with some extremely talented people with amazing backgrounds. And I think we have some very promising candidates, but we are investing in this a huge amount of time. I particularly, as well as many other members of the team, we've been willing to say, all right, as busy as we are, we're going to set aside the time to interview a large number of people, interview them seriously, have standardized interviewing process, give them exercises which they need to perform so that we can see how they operate in the real world. And this is for senior people as well as more junior positions. In fact, it's more for senior positions. We expect, and I think we at this point have developed an extremely refined method of identifying top talent. And that goes for talent that has come from the community, but is much more strict for talent which hasn't arisen directly from the community as well. And so I think that this is going to massively professionalize our ability to add talent to the team and to onboard them. There's also the question of having a roadmap. As you guys probably know, we will be presenting a roadmap to the community next Thursday. And like this meeting, when we announced we would have this meeting, we announced it several times and it didn't happen. We put a stop to that. We announced this meeting. I announced this meeting in a forum post when I announced Operation Champion. This meeting is happening. Doesn't matter how busy we are. We make it happen. The roadmap will be presented. It's happening. There's no more excuses around things like this. We just simply make them happen. So that kind of roadmap, I think, is extremely important to being able to provide us, but everyone, the kind of long-term vision that we were talking about earlier on in this call. It also means starting to have more engagement with events and creating, especially now that the pandemic is basically over, more opportunity for people to meet in the real world. We are obviously a pseudonymous community, but there's great value in creating bonds between people in the physical world. So I'm not talking about conferences, although we will be involved in some of that as well, and we're going to Bitcoin Miami, for example. But it's much more about meetups, much more about local groups and chapters. And this is not something we'll be able to do immediately because there's a lot of other stuff that we've discussed. But I think that is also going to be a key aspect in terms of building a sustainable, long-term, and committed community. And finally, Sovryn Champions, which is an ongoing effort to provide you guys with a path towards being more engaged. All right. In terms of this execution, what can you expect in Q2? In other words, April, May, June. You can expect refreshed branding, which I think will be inspiring, powerful, and set us apart. You can expect our analytics, at least the first two stages of the analytics, to be done. You can expect content pillars. In other words, big pieces of content which are going to act as the cornerstone of all of the other content that we put together, and will make it much easier for us to put out quality content in the future. You can expect communication, training, and mastery for the CMs, for everyone on the adoption team, for our devs, and for the community, so that we can all be talking with the tone of voice that is going to reflect what the consistency that we want to have, and is going to help and calculate in all of us type of values that we choose for ourselves and to represent the values and principles of Sovryn. You can expect talent acquisition, top talent. You can expect us to have OKRs and accountability and KPIs. And you can expect us to struggle because it's difficult, but to work towards, on a ceaseless basis, Sovryn Champions. To wit, we already are working towards this. There's this town hall as an example. There is the fact that we'll be putting this into the forum, but much more action-oriented is we're working to invite people to help us as champions in Miami, the Miami champions, and we've already started to assemble a group of people who will be helping us with that. We have an additional thing which I hope to be able to announce, and this coming Thursday we'll be announcing a sub-DAO that we've worked to set up, which is going to be focused specifically around marketing and will be community driven and will act as a model for additional such efforts. And I think it's going to be pretty dope. So we'll not only have the roadmap discussion next community meeting, but we'll have that the Whispers DAO that we'll be able to talk about, which we've done in collaboration with Factory DAO. So finally, bringing this all together, what does this mean? It means creating a system, a machine, all right, which is automated in either truly automated, in other words, we have fully automated processes, or it's automated in terms of the processes that people are following, adhering to, and understanding. It means training ourselves, the core team, the community, and creating ways for everyone to become part of this machine. We've started to work out and map out what this machine is, and we will continue to work on, refine, and share this information with you guys where appropriate. And so that is the high-level introduction. I apologize that it was a bit long. We'll have to continue most of this conversation off of this call, but we have about 15 minutes left, so I'd like to open it up to comments, conversation, and questions.
Hi, this is Magnus here with a question from YouTube. Well, more of a comment saying, I like the nation vision. Curious on Yago's thoughts on nation state reactions.
All right, a little bit of a complicated question, but I think here's how I would frame it, basically. I don't think that there's going to be much of a reaction. When I first got into Bitcoin, I expected that governments would try and shut it down immediately. They haven't. And having spent the last 10 or 12 years talking to regulators and government officials and sort of observing what they do, it's become apparent to me that they are not people with strong imaginations. They are very, very tied to their status quo of the world, and they can't really imagine a scenario. They couldn't then imagine a scenario where Bitcoin would become adopted by a nation state or become a threat to anything that they believe in. And so I think by the time they are paying attention to us, we're probably very, very close to being on the way to winning.
Okay, there are a few questions from YouTube, so I'll just list another. A guy said, my opinion, referral rewards would be a great marketing ploy. It's been wildly successful for Celsius. Referral programs would be great because Sovryn has a high learning curve. Any thoughts there?
That's 100% true. We would love to introduce referrals, and we are working on ways to do that. However, we actually built out a whole system, smart contract-based system for referrals, and I think we wasted a lot of time on that. And the reason is referrals are extremely difficult to do in a decentralized environment because they become extremely exploitable. I'll give you an example. Let's say we give, okay, so Celsius will say, all right, get your friend to join and both of you will get $50, right? Like that's a typical referral kind of thing. Let's say we did that with a non-KYC, no ID, totally pseudonymous system. Basically, somebody would go create 1,000 accounts, right? And then those accounts would invite each other and they would, just drain us of funds. So, okay, another thing that some things do, like poker sites or trading sites do, is they say, all right, you get $200, here's $200, but you can only withdraw it once you've done, I don't know, $10,000 in trades. Okay, we can't do that because if we give people $200, they can just withdraw the $200, right? There's no sort of it's not an IOU, it's actual money that we're giving. So what we could do is build out a smart contract which observes their behavior and only hands them the $200 once they've done $10,000 in trades or whatever. But that is a huge undertaking in terms of the solidity work. So I don't think it's not something we're going to get to, but it's not the first thing that we'll do. And if you think about sort of when I was talking about user experience, the first things that we're going to be focusing on the Virgin user experience and the Sovryn user experience, the ongoing user experience, which I think that would fall under probably only in the second half of this year.
There are multiple comments on YouTube also, that are asking about with the rebranding, are we going to continue the cartoon route? Some of the comments have I suppose, more negative opinions about the current, I guess, brand look. With the new agency, is that going to change?
We haven't made a final decision about this, and we want to engage you guys a little bit if we're possible in this process. However, I will say that probably not. I'm leaning against it, and I think most people are leaning against it. I think it worked great at the beginning, and it made sense, but we need to elevate ourselves above being a meme coin. And when we started doing this, I think it was fresher and newer, but a lot of projects now have sort of gone this route of like gimmicky, comic-y stuff. I don't think they do it with the quality that we do it, but I think it's become more cliche. So my intuition is we should move away from it and provide something, again, provide the world with something new, fresh, something that people haven't seen before. And at the same time, also something professional, powerful, that can eventually also attract larger players and institutions. And it's also something where people are going to be trusting the system effectively with large amounts of money, and so it needs to be able to reflect that kind of trust.
Again, no shortage of questions here from the YouTube channel chat. William Mason comments, it's super simple, limit orders, mobile app, and launch zero. Problem solved. We don't need more town halls to generate more adoption. Do these three things and you'll be golden. Any comments there? There's a few people echoing that statement.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree. I think there's a lot we can do in terms of I think ultimately, if we don't have the right product, then it doesn't matter, right? But I think one of the things is no product sells itself. And we have a challenge ahead of us. We're building out an entirely new ecosystem. So I think people need to be aware of what we're doing. And one of the things that I don't want to happen is for us to launch zero and for it not to get the attention it deserves. I also don't think that limit orders would work by themselves because we have to improve and increase the amount of liquidity, and that happens by having larger amounts of people trading. So I think it's a partnership between dev and adoption and communication. And what my goal here is, and I think our goal is, to have both sides of the brain, the left side of the brain, dev, the right side of the brain, adoption, on the same level, both of them being world-class, excellent, and killing it. And I think that's how we guarantee victory.
Yeah, thanks for that. And did have a question from Trust No One on the YouTube chat. It says, question, how does Sovryn plan teaching users about RSK? Big hurdle is trust in sidechains and why RSK is best.
Yes. So that's one of the content pillars that we're working on. And it's also part of the roadmap because I think we need to go beyond just rootstock. And we need people to understand where we're going also beyond like where we're, like they say in Back to the Future, where we're going and not need no roads, right? So I totally agree with that. And I think one of the things that we haven't professionalized enough is having those core assets of content pillars. And Bas and other people on the team have been working hard to put together those content pillars, and they're going to provide us with basically like mini encyclopedias of, key questions, like all of the key questions that people frequently ask, like what makes rootstock great? How does it compare to other things? How are we different from other competing things? How are we different from wrapped Bitcoin, right? There's a whole bunch of questions that keep coming up, and we'll have content pillars around all of those, and already are along the way with that.
How have the initial interactions with Pattern been going?
I've been impressed. I think they do good work. I think they do really good work, and I think we do really good work in terms of squeezing every ounce of creativity that they have out of them. I think we make them work harder than any other client.
Did have a follow-up question about the affiliate stuff. Michaelis asks, can't the affiliate reward go to vesting for 10 months? That would prevent the get-rich-fast scheme.
We've considered that. However, it might work. And the problem is that what we've seen with most affiliate marketing is that it's very much there's sort of like a logarithmic pattern in terms of how powerful affiliates are for you or referrals are for you. So like an extremely small percentage of the affiliates or referrers will provide you with the vast majority of new users and new leads. And the thing about those really great affiliates is that they, first of all, can choose many different projects to work with, but also the way that they build everything, they're extremely data-driven, and why they're so successful, they're willing to spend to reach new users and new leads on the basis of a very strong understanding of how much they can bring in from the project by doing so. And so they actually work on relatively thin margins. The problem is that by providing vesting rewards for that kind of activity, it breaks their models because they need basically the funds to be liquid because they use those funds to continue generating additional leads. So it's not something that can't work, and maybe we need to go back a bit to the drawing board on that a little bit, and we should bring that up again in terms of our product backlog. I think that's a good comment, but that is why we haven't made a big push on that yet. I have time for one last question, and then I think tomorrow or in the next, whenever it's available, we'll publish this to the forum and continue the conversation there.
Yago?
Yeah. So
I've watched your presentation, and I'm going to be brutally honest. And even though I appreciate a lot of effort's gone into it and it's top level, I think it's very cluttered. I don't think it's very clear. And personally, if these people walked into that you've worked with, and I appreciate that it's high level and first time around, but I would have asked them to leave the boardroom. That's my honest opinion with this. On a top level basis, they have not made it very clear what you should be doing, what pitfalls are. And there's a lot of mention of keywords and buzzwords and what have you, but I just think it's very cluttered. Basic things like you mentioned, visions. What exactly is Sovryn's vision? Those things are going to be highlighted. What exactly is the message we got to say? And these things aren't made very clear. A fundamental mistake that's been done here is there's a huge difference between branding and creating a brand. That hasn't been identified clearly in this presentation. But yeah, I'm happy to engage with you outside of this because I don't know what the time limit is or what have you, but personally I think this is very disappointing, even though a lot of work's gone into it, but I don't think it's going to solve your problem.
Well, Janti, thank you very much for your brutal honesty. It's extremely appreciated. I'll say two things. First of all, it's true. We didn't present the meat of all of these different things. What we presented was what I believe is a framework that we can work under, and we need to, and that's why we'll have additional town halls around things like content, branding, etc. We'll go more into detail in these things. I also point out that we're at the kickoff of this work, and this is a guide around the type of work that we expect to be doing. For example, the brand isn't done, so those principles or values. While we're working on it, we're not at a point where I think we can come to a final decision around it or present it. So that's the first part. I don't say that as an excuse. I say that because I think that was what we were trying, or I was trying to accomplish with this presentation. Beyond that, and the much more important part of my comment to you is, as I prefaced at the beginning, my professional background is not in marketing, and I may be totally wrong in the approach that I'm taking. And if so, I want to get smacked over the head. And if you're the right person to do that, smack me over the head. Let's have a conversation. Let's figure out how we are more effective and deliver the kinds of things that your experience tells you that we should be delivering. So I don't know what your background is. I think it's the first time we're talking, but I appreciate you jumping in, and I'd love to have a conversation.
Perfect. No problems. Absolutely first time we've chatted, but I'll also be in the group at 9 o'clock tonight, or it's 2 hours from now. We'll pick up there, and but love to have a conversation, love to help, have been with you guys since the beginning, and I think there's value to be had, but I hope you didn't pay people for this presentation.
This is my work. If anyone's to blame, it's me.
Okay, well, that's perfect. Okay, no, that's great. Awesome. But no, you said you've got these other people in, and if that's what if they guided you, the guys with all those brands in the beginning, please get your money back. But that's fine.
That's fine. All right, John T. I have to jump to actually a meeting with Patton, who had no hand in this. But please ping me. Let's have a conversation. And if anyone else feels like they have a significant contribution they can add, also feel free to add your thoughts in the forum over the next few days, and or ping me directly. Thank you, everyone. I feel like we've got a big job ahead of us, but I think that we're already starting to see significant improvements internally and to a certain degree externally, and I'm excited about what's to come. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your support. Let's go.